The first poem I ever wrote was when I was 9, almost 10, for a class. And it was called Under the Sea, and it rhymed. And my mom told me what a manatee was so I could come up with a rhyme because I wasn't old enough to know what a manatee was. But that poem actually got published in Read magazine, I think, by the time I was 11, which was funny. So, yeah, and I would write after that, rhyming and such, but nothing that I really considered important or serious until after I got off to college, I would say. In college, I did work for the Daily Illini. I had a I had a weekly column for a soap opera thing, which was so silly. But I wrote news editorial articles as well and interviewed people and was a photographer for bands, local bands. Like a dog named, I'm trying to remember the name. I won't even get into that. But I worked for the newspaper. But at one point, some people I knew started a literary magazine that was called Linsey Woolsey. And I submitted stuff to that, and of course it didn't have a name listing, and I had a bunch of pieces published through that without without them knowing it was me when it was being accepted. But that's probably about the extent of my writing for, beyond what I was writing as a journalism major, other than writing on my own. I took poetry classes. You were going to say something? Yeah? Yeah, that was... Sure. Um, I always liked to sing. I never really pushed it for being something, for me to do until I found out that one of my oldest best friends, that same Sherry girl, her husband was a guitar player. I'm like, hey, let's do an acoustic band, and we played at things in Chicago, but there was no plan for actually going anywhere with it. People like hearing me sing, which I like singing, so how perfect is that? Um, with I wanted to go into writing, but I didn't know when I was in college. I just said I find myself writing, so I'm going to go into journalism. And by the time I took a journalism design course, I figured it out like that. Snap my fingers. I'm like, this is what I want to do. I want to design things, magazines, books, newspapers, something. This is what I want. And it's amazing how quickly I was like, this is great. I figured it out. So I enjoyed doing that. You mentioned things like acquaintance rape workshop facilitator. Did I fall into it? I guess I did, because when I was in college, this is when you get away from a family and you get to be on your own. You get to discover how, no offense, how easy it is for men to just feel like, oh, I can just get a girl drunk and I can have sex with her, and that's not a problem because, well, we're in college. This is what you can do. And I would hear statistics and hear stories from women about how 1 in 4 women would be raped by someone by the time they left college, and 1 in 3 in their lifetimes. And that is such a startling, frightening number. And I went to get into a class, and I ate up this knowledge with a spoon, and I wanted to do anything I could to help anyone I could. And I wrote extensively on the topic as well, because you hear a lot of stories, and you don't want women's voices to go silent. And so I would write about stories of rape situations or sexism stories and try to get that out there. And people would come to me, oh, I hear you did this. My wife was actually raped. I'm like, does she need someone to talk to? You get into this, you just want to be able to try to help, because you see how the way things are sometimes and you can't sit still. So you do everything you can. You're, well, I won't go speaking into that because I'd rather not, just because I don't want to stir waves or make waves or stir any controversy with either sex with any opinion on anything. But yeah, I agree with you. And how exactly do you go about doing that? Ouch. I a family member was interested in it, but then one of the men that was in the band with me in after I had left college, a friend of mine from college, Brian, he was moved to Seattle and he was getting married, and he asked me to. He wanted me to sing at the wedding, and he wanted me to be the minister for the wedding. So I said, well, thank you very much. I'm really honored, but I think that the ministerial job is probably enough, and I probably shouldn't be singing as well. Thank you for that. But I sang at their reception. They were impressed with that. So I was able to pull off, and it was a wonderful thing to be able to marry them as well. As a bad turn of events, I'm just going to share this little side story with you. At the same time, my mother had leukemia, and the chemo, she was back in, she was out of remission and was going through it again, and she couldn't, and she just decided, I can't have any more, I can't tolerate any more medical procedures on me. And my friend Brian heard about this, and he says, oh, for that, you don't have to minister the wedding. And I said, Brian, this is the one piece of good that is going on for me right now. I'm sure I'll be fine. My mother will be alive, and she was. So I would love to do it. Oh, okay. And it was a wonderful respite. It was a great opportunity to do something like that when bad news around my own family was circling at the same time. That's really funny because I got a camera from my mom when I was in high school. I still have it here, my 35 millimeter. That doesn't work, but I just love it so much. And I would take portraits of my friends in high school. We lived right at a ravine, and they would just come over and I would take pictures of people for people. And by the time I got into college, I didn't try to push that too much, although I would take portraits of friends of mine. I think I took some fraternity group photos, the things that would appear in the yearbook. And I would do that and get paid to do that for a few of them. But that's just kind of something I stumbled into. And then once you were out of school and working, the idea of taking, oh, can I take pictures of you, just falls to the wayside. You don't think about doing that anymore because you've got a whole heft of other things to worry about on your plate. So, but it was fun to do it while I was in high school and in college. Well, that was what I was doing when I was working. That was one of my best. It's a good title that I had for the most recent company that I had worked for. It was I designed 2 magazines. I had designed and was designer for multiple ones, but I was an art director and had a staff and did design work for 2 magazines and checked over photography for it sometimes. Started their web design for them, but the title art director just sounds really cool, doesn't it? I was designing magazines and making sure that they went out according to plan, which when you do magazines, you as the production people, the design people, you have to make sure that ads, or the ad department will say you've got these, and they'll come up with a layout of where ads have to go, but you've got to make sure that the stories and all images will fit in appropriately and that everything is actually working perfectly. And the thing is, every editor will be late with their copy, and I'm like, I've got to go test for blueprints for these things right now, and it wouldn't have copy for people, and so you have to come up and try to be able to pull it off and work a lot of late nights because other people wouldn't get things done because you're the one that's at the end of the line, and so you get it done because there's no choice. You've got to get the thing out. It's kind of like a newspaper, the same kind of thing. You have to get this thing turned around. So the end people, or the people that are designing it and put together, they're the people that are working late to be able to pull it off all the time. So art director sounds nice, but a couple days of the month you're working really late to try to catch up for everybody's mistakes. Sure. I mentioned briefly that a friend of mine played the acoustic guitar, and I said, hey, we should sing songs. And I think they had a notebook and being creative, and they're like, all right, well, you've got to have a title for our band. How about, and he's looking at a notebook on the phone with me, how about Vincent Price Ate My Sandwich? And I'm like, probably a little long, probably not a good title for a band. And then he looks at something and he says, how about Mom's Favorite Vase? And I'm like, what does that mean? He goes, didn't you watch the Brady Bunch? And I said, no. I'm one of those weirdos that didn't, I guess. He says, well, the boys weren't allowed to play ball in the house, but they did, and they broke Mom's Favorite Vase. And I'm like, wow, that's so existentially weird that why don't we take that as a band name? So we were Mom's Favorite Vase, and I asked my buddy Brian to join in, and we would play at bars, and a band that was a cover band for, they were called Uncle John's Band, so I guess you would know that who they'd be a cover band for. They actually opened for us at one of our shows, but things in Chicago were always really tiny, and you'd get probably paid in beer, but it was a fun thing to be able to do. And I really did enjoy it. When we would go our separate ways, because marriages and moving, like my friend Brian moved, I had a very serious auto accident, so I was out of commission for a while. And I got together with my husband, John. I was still doing poetry, and by virtue of doing things on the internet more, I would find musicians. And I said, hey, what do you think? Would this be cool to mix poetry readings of mine with your music? And some were very cool with it, and I still work with some people that are outside of Nashville. There's a gentleman from South Africa that I would do music with annually when he would come to the States. And so I just try to keep finding different ways to get my message out, whether it is visually with photography or if it's poetry or by sharing it by doing performance art. Okay. Oh, wow. That was something that was like a journal book that's probably the least consequential. I think you just picked the least consequential book of mine and mentioned it because it was just about a bunch of letters to someone. It was a letter diary thing, and it was relatively short. That was done at contest time for when I was doing things with Scars Publications, and we'd be looking for things to publish them into books. The first book I ever published actually was called Hope Chest in the Attic, and I don't know where that title came from, but I collected up, and I called it 13 Years because it was from when I was young that I would have poetry and prose, and I had an art section in the middle. And yeah, this is back in the day when you didn't have print on demand, and so I was like, wow, I can have colored ink on the inside pages and have two-toned inks to choose from because you try to do anything to make your book look interesting and different. So I did that one, and I then, with my second book, which is not in print right now, The Window, that was originally just done as a home printing that I would have in bookstores through Ohio. I can't even think of the other places where they've been. But then I started doing other books, and especially because after that accident came, I had thought, wow, I've got a couple good books out, including ones that I didn't mention to you, one called Close Cover Before Striking, which is a great matchbook reference. Just sounds like a cool title for a book. And the other one was called Contents Under Pressure. And those were good volumes, but I had pardon me? You're absolutely right, I do. And that's the only one that I had copyrighted by the US government, just because it was such a huge, massive endeavor that I did with that one. But yeah, so I think after I had said it, after I'd gone through that accident, I thought, wow, I could have died. It was very serious. And I thought, I don't have any thing to be able to say, here's a compilation, and I wanted to be able to do that. And so I produced an art book and a poetry book and a prose book of a 25-year collection books of them all. And that was a while ago, but that was because I had gone through the accident and started reevaluating things and settling down and finding my man of my dreams to marry. I thought I should have something like that for my earlier works and be able to have them so that people could be able to see them all in one form if they wanted to. It was. It is a book. It's a fictional novel about basically a government's conspiracy. The lead character, it's a medical company, and the woman there's a woman leading the R&D for this massive company, and she was looking for things to be able to find vaccines or something for a cure for AIDS. And in the process, she finds somebody from college that she hasn't seen in so long, and she totally falls for him. He is then attacked and injected with something, and they find out that he has just gone straight into AIDS, and she's like getting seeds of knowledge and trying to be able to find out if the government has anything that would be able to save this man that she's known for so long and fallen in love with, who has now been attacked because of her. And it becomes this action thing, and I'll just leave it at that because it's really, really long. But it was something that I had actually started writing before, when I had just finished those 4 books that I had mentioned to you, and I had gotten maybe 5 of those chapters done, and I liked it, and I think I did a feature in Chicago where I read one of the chapters, which was funny. It was, chapter 3, The Man, and I'm doing this thing talking about the man, and I've got some, like, hulking, I'm a wrestler guy, coming up to me afterward going, oh my God, I want to be that woman in the novel, and I'm just thinking, that's so cute. You probably wouldn't give me the time of day at any other time, but I'm glad that you appreciated my reading from this story. But it was shortly after I'd gone through those novels that I drove around the country by car. I decided, this sounds like such a silly, weird thing to say, but I had known people that went to college and then they said, I'm going to take a year off and travel before working. And I didn't do that. I just got right into the workforce. I was doing really, really well. I know you were in New York, and I didn't go to New York City, but Chicago is a pretty expensive place to live, and I was doing so well that I was able to quit my job, continue to pay for my apartment in Chicago, and travel around the country by car. And I had money to be able to do this. I still had a savings. All was good. But after I had done that, and which meant I had a break from writing my novel, I was driving to my parents' house to visit them when I came back, and a couple cars hit me, and I was very, very seriously injured. And that pretty much put a halt on thinking about writing. because I had to relearn how to walk and talk and eat. So working on a novel was not on my mind at that point in the game. But at one point, my husband said, you should really get back to that. And I said, I know. I've just been thinking about it. And I would do something like I'd be sitting in a bath and I would be envisioning, oh, all right, if there's a scene where if this character needed to do, so I would just start thinking about it. And once I took a trip to visit my parents. They lived in Southwest Florida. And I think I was there for 2 or 3 weeks. And I wrote the rest of the book. I just started churning everything out. Yeah, it needed editing, but I had these ideas percolating in my head for all this time, and I just let them all out really, really quickly. So it is a long book. It could be shortened. I think I heard a story about a successful director. I don't know if it was J.J. Abrams or if there was somebody that decided they were going to write a novel, but there would be an old book that was a novel, and there would be writing in the margins of 2 people within each other, and it would be a separate story that would revolve around that. And I thought maybe as I had gotten older, that would be something that me and my husband would do, that we'd come up with 2 character names and come up with a separate story. Whether it goes inside of a shortened version of The Key to Believing or another novel, I don't know, but that was another idea for probably a far, far future plan for writing for large novels in the future. Of course I do. Of course. I think you probably would know a little bit more about it if you read more of my poetry. I think I had to have a book of a collection of a bunch of death poems. I've gone through a lot of stuff and seen a lot of bad things, and sometimes the only way to let it out is by writing poetry about it. As I had said, for instance, when my mother passed away, I was planning on going to see her, and my father called me and he said, "You better come here quickly. I mean, really quickly. If you have to get first class in order to come here early, Mom's really, really sick." I said, okay. Well, there was a hurricane coming through, so I could only come through on the 1st of September, but she died the day before. And so I had a flight where I was going to, and everybody flew in for the weekend because it was Labor Day weekend. And so all the family flew down to Florida, but then everybody left. But I had tickets because I was planning on seeing them from the 10th to the 18th, but I made an early flight, so now I'm alone with my dad from, the 3rd of September through the 18th. And he is completely, I mean, of course, as you would expect, he's completely lost because his wife just died. So I'm completely lost, but I can't go sobbing to him about it because he's got it worse than I do, right? So I found myself writing a lot because it was something that was the only way I could be able to hold back the emotion at times like that. And as I said, historically, that's happened with things like understanding people with acquaintance rape issues or sexism issues. I would get those down and write them down, and I would have them be stories for people. When the accident came, I was in the hospital. I had a hard time functioning, but I was like, give me a pen or a pencil and give me paper. And I wrote, and it was terrible. But I had to do it just to be able to get the emotion of how I've lost everything, and I'm having to start from scratch out. I would hear stories about how people had died. Someone close to me had died, so I would write for them about stuff. And so, because as I would say, you're creative and you want to write things, but you never want to write when you're happy. Usually, you're happy. You want to go have fun and leave it at that. You don't know what to do when you've got something terrible, dropping in the pit of your stomach because something awful has happened, and you don't know how to be able to cope with it. You don't know if you can talk to people or how much you can talk to people or what's right to do for any of that. So often writing seems to be the best way to be able to keep yourself sane, I guess. Exactly. Yep. That's a great title. It's a collection of editorials because I do things for Scars Publications, which started right after I got out of college. I started this up as a chance to be able to publish that first book, Hope Just in the Attic, and to start the first literary magazine, which is still running, which is actually named after a poem of mine that talks about the dysfunctionality sometimes of children, churches, and daddies. That's the name of the magazine. It started back in '93. This is before everybody could see everything about it online or at a website. So I would get, people would see that title, Children, Churches, and Daddies, and I would get a cover letter sent in the mail of a woman saying, "Hi, I'm a Christian mother of 4, and these are my 4 rhyming poems." And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm going to have to clarify this because that's not what this magazine is about. Oops, I didn't get that. But over the years, it's been easier to often just call them by letters and say cc&d and have a short name for it. But I started that up then. And what was your original question? No, I'm talking about the magazine stuff. I feel like I've gotten off subject. Have I? I hope not. Well, when I was doing that with cc&d, and I was writing editorials for them, and so after a while, especially in the W. Bush years, I was writing lots of editorials, and I thought I should collect them together. I had a piece that talked about how Hitler being a minister, or a couple pieces about O.J. Simpson. I have pieces about global warming, and I have it on both sides of it in the editorials. And I thought I should put these things together, and I figured, why don't I give it a name that actually talks about all the weird things that can go on in the world, and that's why I called it Adolf Hitler, O.J. Simpson, and U.S. politics. But it's a collection of editorials. Yep. Boss Lady's editorials is the first one. Yep. Yeah, it was a more recent version. I didn't hear. Enriched is there was an annual collection book from CC&D and Down in the Dirt magazine, which I should, by the way, mention. I had said I started up CC&D in '93. And at one point in '94, I had a little supplement section inside of it called Down in the Dirt. And that went on for like a few years, or a few issues in the 1 year, and that was it. But then after the accident and after I got married, I'm like, that was a good title. Maybe I should start that up and on its own as a magazine. So it started later, but so that would explain why I have the 2 magazines now that I'm running. But Scars Publications not only release, pardon me? That was the next collection book I had of my stuff since those collection books, which are poetry, prose, and art in 3 massive volumes. I had a photo of me, an old photo of me where I was jumping on a hotel bed, and somebody took a snapshot of me, and I had that for the longest time as my JanetKuypers.com main picture. Just a picture, my hair's flying, you don't even see my face, and I'm jumping. And I said, why don't I have a thing called personal nudity? I'll just have a bar over where there would be clothes and call it personal nudity because, well, this kind of tells you something about me, what I am inside. So I thought that would be a fun title for a collection book. So another big volume, but yeah. Pharaoh memes. Yeah, my husband came up with. They are poetry books of things that I have done since I have moved to Texas. My husband came up with that name. And I think it's a great idea because if you can be attracted to someone's pheromones, maybe you could be attracted to their memes. So pheromemes, it's not a word, but maybe you could be attracted to somebody's words or ideas. So I thought that would be a perfect title for doing potentially a series of